Everybody. Triathlete in training squad train a lot of months together, and I wanted to know if even if they remain rivals in competition, there is sometimes a team spirit during races. For example, Mario Mola and Richard Murray, they have a similar profile. Sometimes they are in the second pack on the bike. Do you think they have a team spirit, or do they stay focused on their own interest?
That's a difficult one. Of course, we try to encourage that, and we try to find those synergies where you work together for the benefit of both. However, in practicality, it's quite difficult to pull off. One of the biggest threats to each other are each other, so they have to be able to look past that. Within the group, they don't actually do that much training together. There was a coach educator that came to watch us train in the summer from New Zealand, Paul, Tristan, and he asked me this question: is this a team or is it a group? And it definitely got me thinking, because you might think of a squad, it's a team, right? But I really did think my answer was it's a group of individuals, and you've got to do what's right for the individuals. And the success of the group comes from the success of individuals, and there's a positive to that and a negative. Everyone has to be finding their own success for the group to thrive. As soon as you can get this negativity, or if you're not performing, we have a real strict accountability in our environments, where if we don't perform, if the athletes do not perform, things start to fall apart. It can get very, very difficult. So to answer the question, I don't know if I answered the question, but it's really challenging with, you might call alphas like that are both trying to win the race. It's very difficult to have in a group. I know Darren's had that at various times as well. And I mean, you have that within federations too, don't you? But within our dynamic, they're from different countries, which help. But so the answer, we tried to find those synergies, but the reality when you're racing is not so simple.
Darren, you've been in a similar situation quite often, I assume?
Yeah, sometimes we've had, it's about getting the best out of yourself, and sometimes if you're stuck in a position and nobody else is wanting to help, then you help your compatriot. And that's the better good. It's a personal win. We see in our squad in the past where one of our colleagues mentioned the other day, they'll wait at the finish line. Often, if they've done well, they'll see somebody else of the squad come through and make a breakthrough. It really means a lot to them, because even colleagues here in the room, we see them work very hard. We don't begrudge somebody doing well if they've worked very hard. We're delighted for them. And that's the same sort of feeling that we try and encourage in our group. And it's not that hard to encourage it. Occasionally there's a few people who may get their nose out of joint, but mostly we see our colleagues working very hard. We genuinely want hard-working, good people to do well in life. Not necessarily but it's not a win at all costs mentality. It's do a great job, do our absolute best. And sometimes that means pulling together two people in a bad situation, not made the pack for some reason. My rationale is, let's do whatever's necessary to get back into the game. If one person's sitting at the back, taking advantage of the other person, I don't think that fits with the ethos or spirit of how we work, because normally they both lose by not getting back into the game. So,
Paul?
Hi there, Paul Larson, High Performance Sport New Zealand. I guess this kind of feeds off your comment there, Joel, with respect to Tristan coming over and observing the New Zealand team in practice. We've got lots of support, at least we try to put a lot of support around our coaches. I was just wondering who's there to support you guys in terms of your professional development, your welfare. How do you guys go about gaining that you can't, that normal federations kind of get the, I think that's the question.
I must say that I've had zero, as in that means zero, support from any federation for professional development. Zero. It doesn't mean that I didn't get better. It just meant that I took care of it myself. I'm actually pretty objective. I can rationalize what I need. I have employed some people to come in and review my program. A very smart individual. I paid him. I wanted him to make me squirm, make me uncomfortable, fidget in my seat. He was a psychologist, former SAS, former high-performance manager, former elite medalist coach. He was the real big, bulky guy. I wanted him. I paid him really good money to come in and find holes in me, find holes in my program. It's interesting you ask, because of course I have colleagues and I lean on colleagues. I have a couple of mentors. I had a relationship with you until the bloody New Zealanders paid you to work with them, and there was then a conflict of interest. Paul was one of my advisors. We'd talk every 6 months or so. We'd get on Skype. It was the first time we actually met in person this week. But I really valued the fact that I found somebody who knew the sport, was a really interesting and experienced researcher. It's just right up my alley. We had some good discussions, right? I didn't really need somebody to set up a level 1 or 2 course. I went straight to level 3 and lectured at half the course back in 1996. I haven't actually done a formal course since then. It doesn't mean I didn't learn, it's just that I self-directed. I have great colleagues. I've called upon a number of people in this room. Ronald Lepers, who was there yesterday talking, he was the man in terms of muscle fatigue many years ago. I also saw him race in the elite wave of the Hawaii Ironman. So when I took on Chris McCormack that year, guess who I spoke to for a couple of hours? And he was very gracious with his information. I was implementing some of the thoughts and that sort of stuff. So what I would say to those people who don't really have people looking after their own interests is to not make that stop you from improving. Ask. The fellow who was talking about overtraining, I reviewed the papers 10 years ago. I reviewed them 2 years ago. I basically spoke to all the primary authors on Skype. There was only one guy, Mewson, who I couldn't actually nail, but the rest of them spoke to me just for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I made it always easy for them to help me, help myself. So I didn't burden them with a lot of time. I always offered something in return. And that's really probably a critical point. I get asked for information, which might take me an hour to put together. For somebody who has just asked, there's never an offer of how can I help you in return. There's, that sort of thing. So I guess if I had one hint for people who wanted to learn, ask good people. However, don't make it difficult for them to help you. Make it really easy, because they're competent people. They're normally quite busy, but they have a lot to offer.
One thing one message I would like to try to pass to our coaches is, I've been working for the last few years mostly with athletes strongly funded by the federations. So it's different from private or semi-private coaching. Joel and Darren, they have both experiences, working with or for national federations, with funded athletes, and now working on a different way. One of the things, there's positive and negative things on both ways. One of the positive things for me is that I don't have direct agreements with the athletes related with performance. So for me, it makes it very easy when I have to make my planning options. My planning options are totally focused on the goals and on the goals of the athlete. And so the financial factor only entering for the athlete part, not for mine. So it makes it really easy, and for me, that's one thing I always try to avoid, is to have any option on the planning different from the option I would like to, or I believe it would be the best option, but trying to avoid it because of financial, from financial part you can take from this race. So I only take care of that with the athletes, and also the athletes when they are well funded and they are well supported. It's easier for them to understand some kind of racing options. Not racing always, and some athletes they need to, for financial reasons, can make some different options. So that's two different things. One way of private funding, and it's very positive when you have to fight for your life. Things easy every day. I know by experience that it's not good. On other way, when you are funded and you need to plan, you can just clean your planning from a few things you would probably include if you would need more money.
Philippe?
Yeah. Philippe Fattori from France. You had played different roles, high performance director, national coach, or private coach. And what I would like to ask to Darren and Joel is, how do you deal with national federation, first? And second question to the four of you, do you think it's possible to do both national coach and private coach? I'm thinking about Jamie's position.
Was the last bit about Jamie?
Was it the best model? How do we deal with it? Yeah. So, yeah, the first part of dealing with federations. So, it's really different. So I say work with about 8 different federations. I have to say, if I could generalize, the level of interaction is pretty low. We have some very highly ranked athletes, and there's not a lot of proactive communication. There's some ask for plans from us. Some are a little bit more involved, and maybe they want to know what services they can provide. But if my generalization is the involvement is fairly low. Having been on the other side of that, I wouldn't accept that. I don't know why it's the case. When I was on the shoe was on the other foot, working for British Triathlon, and an athlete wanted to leave the program, I would really want to be involved if they were a targeted athlete in the world of sort of accountability, and ownership of performance. It's clearly different. I don't think you can have total ownership and accountability with an athlete and a coach that work outside the program. That's a risk you have to take. But it varies. So in my cases, there's a language barrier, simple as that. We don't have easy ability to communicate in each other's language, and therefore maybe I don't hear from them very often. On one hand, I'm happy that it doesn't create a lot of work for me. I don't want to, there's some of my colleagues that I work with in the room here. Please don't send me all kinds of requests for plans and information. It has to be a meaningful partnership, I think. If it's just requesting information to tick a box to say, yes, we have an annual plan, it doesn't add anything to me. What I like and appreciate is when federations come to me and say, what can we do? How can we help? How can we invest in you? What do you need? And obviously it's about their athlete, but the reluctance that I sometimes see, which I think Frank's presentation covered, the evolution, the progressive federations are looking at it like an investment and a partnership, and that we're not competing with the federations. I get the sense a lot that there's a feeling of unease about the situation, maybe a reluctance to accept it, but not really wanting that to be the case. And I understand federations invest in coaches, they invest in staff, they want their athletes to use those people. However, it doesn't work for everybody, and that's why I appreciated Frank's conversation, because that's not the right model for everybody. It's very difficult for federations to provide the right environment for every athlete. And yeah, so interaction varies. That the best model, I think, is investing in those athletes that have private coaches. As Darren said, we don't have really a lot of investment. Well, we have no investment. Sometimes it's via these stipends, but it's really not any investment in what we're doing. And sometimes it's the fear of, I hear, it's articulated to me, oh, you coach the competitors to our athletes. But I think it's actually very short-sighted, because the advantage that we provide is this multinational environment where the athlete from the different countries, they really profit from being around other great athletes. I mean, how many great athletes have, how many countries, have athletes ranked such as in our group? I mean, you can go and train with world medalists, other top 10 athletes in the world, so that's not available in many countries. So it varies, could be better.
Pour compléter les propos de Joël, je crois que ce qui est important entre la mission
to follow on what Joel has said in terms of the national level and the mission of the coach of an athlete, what's important is that the goals, the objectives have to be clearly defined. National coaches are there to make the nations win, and the individual coaches are there to make their individual athletes win. Perhaps their strategies are different. Today, in the French Triathlon Federation, we have never had a foreign coach come to train our national teams. I'm not saying that this is something that is not doable. What's important is to set up a proper contract between the two parties so that no party feels like it's been given the short end of the stick. Personally, I think I would not say no to this out of hand. Let's say Jimmy Turner, who is training Twensen. If I do not have a flagship coach, perhaps I could use another athlete who will inculcate this will to win, so that I can use this for my own athletes for future generations. I think what's important is to define the objectives. What's the contract? What do I expect from this person? What should I not expect from this person?
In the same time, there's some fear from each part to share some information, because in one way we are in the competitive world and competitive environment, and if you give too much, the federation help you maybe too much, it could help some other athletes from other countries, and in the other way the same. So this is why my second question was, how do you feel with the Jamie Turner position, for example, with playing the role as a national coach in Canada and also coaching athletes from Australia or from other countries, it seems to be very difficult.
I've known Jamie for a long time. I knew him before many others recognised that he was a good coach, and he's still got some learning to do, but he's done a good job. Could Jamie go on his own and become a coach where he wasn't funded? Possibly. He wouldn't make very much money. He's much better off having another source of athletes and a good wage. So he's actually probably taken the smartest road that I could think of, which was get funded and have all his support services paid for, yet have the flexibility to have other athletes to broaden the structure. If he was in a position working with Canada, he would have he was handed maybe 3 or 4 girls who are all close to medaling at one of the world under-23s. You know, that's not so bad. He was handed a good wage. He's a good coach, and somebody recognised that. He negotiated to keep a certain number of athletes, and you know, some of them have done extremely well and helped be able to show his ability. Partly their ability, partly his good ability as well. So he's probably got the model that Libby is clearly the one who organised all of this. She saw a real skill set in Jamie. She also saw that this combined group had success. It was pretty clear, wasn't it, from the last Olympic Games, that a multinational, plenty of flavours in the pot helps in performance. So recognising all of those things, then it's simply up to you, however, where if you're pretty objective about who you work with, whether everybody's equal, and so forth. So I don't see, for some people, too much of a conflict. However, at some stage, it depends on who pays the bills. Because at some stage, if he was to produce too good a result for other people, yet was being paid by a certain other country, then they'd more than likely be asking a question about, are we getting value for money? That's all. Good coach, smart operator, set himself up well, people recognise his ability, super.
I have an open question for the panel. Considering there are also team competitions in France and Germany that are gaining importance, would you consider a situation where those team competitions become as equally as important as the World Triathlon Series for athletes? And would you consider being employed by a club or by one of these teams to coach their team?
Anyone?
I think many of my athletes are doing these competitions. They can be quite lucrative for males anyway. Typically the women don't get such a good deal. We have had to make decisions many times over the last years about doing these races which maybe don't fit into the World Series plan. However, sometimes if they're ranked highly enough, they're too good to turn down, and I couldn't tell them to turn those races down. And I don't make any percentage of when they get an appearance fee from a French team, so it doesn't matter to me. But I couldn't say, oh, you should turn these races down. Typically, prior to the Olympics, we make sure we make the right decisions about the number of competitions, but it's a real challenge. There are many options, many competitions between just what we know about the World Series, about the French Grand Prix, about the German Bundesliga. These are very good development competitions in many cases, and they're useful. However, we have to balance that with, I think it's come up in the last 2 days, the number of races is often athletes racing too often. And these are real challenges because there's, these athletes don't have pension plans. There's no retirement fund. You make money when you can, and so we have to make those kind of choices. As far as working for a club, I've never been offered. I think it's an interesting model. Some of these clubs have a lot of resources in France, and they could develop athletes. I don't know how much they're used. Maybe no, but yeah.
I believe this series in Germany or in French, they are good solutions for the athletes in the technical and the financial point of view. With the introduction of the sprint distance in ITU and in Bundesliga as well, they understood well that when it was only Olympic distance, it was too much for the athletes to race there. So they have decreased the distance to sprint distance as we have in the French Grand Prix. So in the technical point of view, it's good 50, 55 minutes opportunities. And as some of the races on ITU series are on sprint distance as well, the recovery time is different. So it makes very good options for the athletes. And I believe if it's well balanced with the main goals of the season, yes, these athletes can perfectly race 2 or 3 international races along the year and as a good experience and as a financial income to help them for the other races or the other camps they need to do.
Can I just say that the French Grand Prix, Bundesliga, they're terrific development opportunities. Fast technical races, hard racing, really hard racing against exceedingly good athletes that development athletes wouldn't be able to race. Development athletes, by and large, couldn't get to race a Gomez or a Brownlee, the top girls, because they wouldn't get into the World Series yet. Yet they can race side by side in a distance comparatively good for the juniors or the developing athletes. It's a wonderful environment. Less useful, perhaps gets in the way of the senior athletes who have special projects, need time to develop between very important races. Good for lead-ups, if you don't mind, that they're not fully fresh and so forth, but yeah.
Oui, donc les clubs français.
Yes, French clubs are part of the category of the best triathletes in France, but also the foreign triathletes, because the specificity of this first division choice is that you can 5 times a year have world-level athletes meeting. As Darren was said, and I will confirm what he said, there are 2 types of people for us in France. There are 2 types of athletes. The athletes who are in a progression, development phase, and it's very good for them to have competitions on their own national territory. They don't have to go very far, but they can measure to others. They can measure themselves to the world elite, and they can see what's the road that remains to be covered. But the danger, and you see this with the elite, what is important to control, first of all, is to learn how to win, and secondly, is to learn how to travel. That is to say, to win outside of home, in a different context, in a country with a different culture, where the language is not the same. All this has to be learned. And that's why today, with our young athletes, we're extremely attentive that they have a schedule in which they will compete on this first division in France, but also at their own level on the junior European cups, even elite coupe, even in the World Championship. WTS, of course, this remains for the high-level athletes, and there are very few athletes who are well armed enough to be able to compete regularly on that circuit. Then, for athletes who are themselves at world level, who are elite, sometimes it's difficult to explain to your own federation, but you say if the focus is the Olympic Games, If the aim is the World Championship, because it's by shining on the World Championship that you will be ready for the Olympic Games, you have to build your calendar around WTS. And then, while respecting a number of races during the year, you can integrate the French Championship and indeed other races. But today, the best French athletes, even if they train in France, they don't compete in the 5 stages, and the best organization would be for them to take part in 2, maybe 3 races on the national soil.
Do you have any other questions?
Hello, I'm Greg Rolt. It's a subject that's very interesting to me because I trained with Darren for a while and I was part of the French team for a while too. There's a fine line between stability and comfort. Comfort gets in the way of performance sometimes, but stability is important. Where is that line in the relationship between the federation and Darren or Joel or in the management of their groups? And my second question would be mainly towards Frank. How would he react if, let's say, Vincent, who is the star of the French Federation today, decided to go to a group, and where would he be willing to go to ensure that Vincent maybe beats Mario or Richard if Vincent was going with Joel?
Feel free.
Tout simplement, connaissant Vincent, même s'il y a des entraîneurs dans la salle
Well,
qui le
knowing
connaissent
Vincent, even if there are
encore mieux
other
que moi,
coaches who know him better than I do,
Vincent prendra toujours sa
will
décision
always make his decision
parce qu'il sent que
because
ce
he
changement va lui
feels
permettre de
that
gagner,
this change is going
va
to
lui
allow
permettre d'avancer,
him
va lui
to
permettre de
progress,
progresser.
to win.
J'avais rappelé rapidement
I recall
son
briefly
parcours. Vincent, il s'est entraîné
trained
dans un club de natation,
in a
puis
swimming
dans une
club,
structure d'entraînement
then
de la
in
Fédération française de natation.
French
Et à partir du moment
Swimming
où il a
Federation
voulu faire
training
du
camp,
triathlon,
and then we wanted
il a
to
été
go
dans
into
une
a triathlon,
structure
and he went
de la
into
fédération,
a federation structure
qui aujourd'hui
which
n'existe plus.
no longer exists today.
Ensuite,
And
il a
then
continué de grandir.
he continued to progress and to
Il
grow,
a été dans un club.
and he went in a club.
Et quand il a voulu passer à
And
autre
when he
chose, au
wanted to do
lendemain
something
des
else,
Jeux de Londres où il termine
after the
11e,
London Games where he
il avait
finished
eu
11th,
il avait terminé de mémoire 10e du test event en
10th of the test
2011
event
et 8e de la grande
and
finale. Donc il
8th
était
of the
vraiment
major final.
dans une grande phase de
So
progression.
he was
Il a eu
progressing,
une fracture de fatigue
but he
durant
had
l'hiver et on lui a fait
stress
confiance et il termine
fracture
11e
in the
des
winter,
Jeux
and
et 15 jours
we
après, il
trusted
termine
him.
3e de la
And
WTS
after
à Stockholm.
the
Donc,
games,
il était vraiment
3
dans
days
une
after
phase
the games,
de
he was
progression.
third
Et
in
pour
Stockholm.
autant,
So he was in a progression
au lendemain des
line.
Jeux,
But
il décide
following
de
the
modifier
games,
sa structure
he
d'entraînement.
decides to change his training
Donc,
structure.
quelle attitude on adopte?
So
On se
what
dit,
should be our attitude?
ne change rien,
Should we tell him
ou
don't
alors,
change anything, or continue
continue à changer.
continue
Et ça, quelque part,
changing?
c'est véritablement la relation
And
de
this
confiance
is
que l'on peut
really
avoir avec
where
le
we have
sportif,
this
qui permet
this confidence relation with
de ne pas se dire je suis
with
une
the athlete.
fédération, je dois
When you have
avoir
to
un
think,
rôle de
okay,
censeur,
I'm not just a
de
federation,
contrôle,
I have
je
a
dois
role
imposer ma vision, mais c'est de
of
discuter
control, I
avec
have
lui
to
pour
impose my
savoir,
vision, but I
si
should
les choix
also
qu'il va
discuss
faire,
with him to know whether the
il
choice
souhaite sont les bons.
is
C'est juste un
we
parallèle
want for him are the good
avec
ones.
Renaud Lavillenie, qui est le
Just one
champion
parallel
olympique
with Renaud Davinini,
de la
who's
perche,
the Olympic
à Londres en 2012.
champion
Au
for
lendemain de
pole
son titre
vaulting
olympique,
in
il annonce dans la presse
2012,
je
and
change de coach.
at the
Quelle est la
following his
réaction en
Olympic
France?
title, he says, I changed my
Il est
coach.
fou.
What was the
Pourquoi
reaction in
il
France?
change
That
un
guy's crazy.
système qui
Why?
gagne?
He's changing a winning
Tout
system.
simplement, moi, mon
But
analyse, c'est
my
de me dire
analysis
qu'il
was
veut
to say,
continuer de
maybe
gagner.
because he wants to
Et peut-être
to
qu'au
go
fond
on
de lui, il
winning.
estime que ce système
Maybe he thinks that
ne
the
va pas lui
system
permettre
is
de
not
continuer
going
de
to
gagner.
help him go on
Donc, il change son
winning,
système.
so he changes the
Donc, c'est ce
system.
qu'on a fait avec
And
Vincent.
this is what we have done with
Il est
Vincent.
parti, sur
He
Reims.
went to
Il s'est
Reims
entouré de compétences. Il a
with
été,
highly
détourné.
skilled people. He went to find them.
Moi, mon job derrière,
My
c'est de
job
me dire,
behind that
bon, d'accord,
is to
tu
say,
vas à Reims,
okay, you go
mais,
to Reims, but
tu nages où?
where are you
Parce que là,
going
on
to
revient aux
swim?
bases. C'est pas
Because
tout
we're going
basique.
back to
Tu
basic.
nages où? Donc,
Where
j'ai
are you going to
multiplié
swim?
des rendez-vous avec
So
le maire
I
adjoint de
organized
l'île de Reims.
a number of
Aujourd'hui, il a les clés de la piscine, il peut nager à 7 heures du matin quand il veut.
meetings with the authorities in Reims, and now he has the keys of the swimming pool. He can go and swim at 7 in the morning if he wants, and with his employee because he has a job in Paris. So when you have to do more than 150 kilometers, it's your employment is getting very, very difficult. But having an employment, it means making money, being able to travel, to be autonomous. So my role was to go and see the employer and to explain that Vincent can also play a different role for him, maybe not by working every day, but by basing this relationship with the employers on communication. And there you have to be convincing, of course. You have to try and explain to people that Vincent's choices go in the direction of his progress, and our role is not to tell us, okay, be careful there, but to say, on the contrary, okay, we'll go
I'd like
along
to
with
ask you a controversial question, Joel and Darren especially. Do you see national federations as co-workers or hurdles that you have to overcome in your work with your athletes?
Historically, for me, federations have given me a lot of flexibility. As a way of working, I was always happy to offload athletes to other competent people to say, if you need some backup, some help. It's the same with the athletes. I would often be the backup or help for them in terms of working with their federation. And sometimes I would have to step in and be strong with my encouragement for the federations to give us some room, to leave, to give choice, those sort of things. But historically, I've said to the federations, look, you know, I'll be the first to ask for help if we need it, and to their credit and to our ability to produce results, which is ultimately what we're after, the results are shared. The results of an athlete who's gone outside of the system but has still been supported by that system, you may know who the coach who developed that person is. I handed 6 athletes at London to their respective head coaches. I was happy to do that. I had no accreditation, I had nothing, no t-shirt, nothing. I didn't have a pass to the stand until one day before. It really didn't matter to me. My job was to make people good. Now, when somebody did well, the country shared in the success. Sweden, US for Sarah, you know, it's shared. I did a lot of the work. They gave me the freedom to do that work. Some people I had to say, no, stop, please, go away, get out of the way. Others just gave me, because I had a good reputation, a historical improvement record. I would lean on them sometimes to help me. I would pull in people if I needed it. I wouldn't tell them stories. So I think this is one of the important bits. Trust. If anyone's worked with me, I'm normally very straight. I will tell them whether their athlete is going good or bad. Robert here from Austria. I'm always very clear. I'm never telling Robert, this is going to be good, and then it's just a disaster. Because it is what it is. We're all trying our best. The goal is to improve somebody's ability to race. We are tools. We are facilitators. Try not to get in the way. And so far, I've had mostly good relationships with people. I'll tell a story about the French. Working with Greg, who asked that previous question. He's a good guy. He's a hard-working guy. He's a good athlete. We had some work to do. We were improving. The French, they had some pretty strict rules about how to get into a World Series. We were improving. We were knocking on that door. We were desperate. He broke his arm. 5 weeks later, we got 4th in a World Cup race. We wanted that opportunity to get into a World Series. They said no. We were desperate. Within 5 weeks of breaking, we got 4th. We had a crack at winning the race. We blew up. Greg blew up just 80 meters short of the winner and then came 4th in that race. No, you're not ready. No, you didn't impress us. I'm going, it was, Pierre, the head coach before. Frank and Pierre weren't exactly my favorites. I wanted this opportunity for Greg. He went on. We had to fight a bit more. He won the World Cup race in Edmonton later that year. They said yes. It was a high benchmark, wasn't it? Perhaps if Greg was a girl, would he have got a start earlier because the depth of girls wasn't as high? Maybe not. Maybe standards are standards, and I understand that now. We got our opportunity. Greg, we just weren't quite good enough, were we, when we got that opportunity? But we were a good team, desperate to become better, working hard. We had a federation who, at first, I wasn't really a fan of, but now I respect them. You know, they made it hard for us. You know, it wasn't as if we were doing it easy. We did lots of work. We tried everything to get this man better. We finally got an opportunity, as history proved. We weren't quite up to the mark. But that's a good process. That's them setting the benchmark. We as coaches want those benchmarks, whether they're set by other athletes, whether they're set by federations. If it was too easy, Greg, to get in, it was not ready, you were not ready earlier. We found out you probably weren't ready later, but you know, if it was easier, would I have changed anything? Probably not. That was just my nature of trying to get somebody as good as they possibly could be. But I do respect the French team, although you weren't my favourite people for about a month there.
Joel?
Yeah, I don't think it's that controversial a question, really, because of course you have to have a partnership. As we've talked, the degree of partnership is different. It's sometimes more involvement is good, sometimes more is bad. But you have to have that involvement. In fact, going off to competitions, as Darren said, that athletes have to go into their national team environment, and we encourage them to do that. They have to function with the staff and learn to work with them, be able to communicate with them. So it's necessary, and we understand as private coaches coming, you know, it's very difficult to get Olympic accreditation, for example. So it's the ethos of how we do things. We want the athletes to be able to self-manage. We don't want them to need their hand held by us or by anybody, but they equally have to work well with the federation. So it's just the degree. It just varies depending who the people are, and we want always a good relationship and work towards that.
Thank you. We have time for one final question. Philippe?
It's a question for Sergio. You have explained us the system you're working with. With the Brazilian, it was the same with the Portuguese team. You seems to control and to coach almost all the athletes. How would you react if one of your athletes would like to get into a private team like Joel or Darren one?
Well, I'm not the performance director in the Brazilian Federation, so it would be more the business of... But it already happened. I mean, some athletes in the group or going back to Brazil and being coached by other coaches or looking for private coaching. And as coaches, we need to be ready to accept athletes and to work with new athletes coming from somewhere, from other coaches, but we need to be ready as well to just let them go when they need to, when they feel they need to. So when I'm not coaching an athlete, I'm working as national coach as well when we are going to races. So I'm pretty used to deal with that. I'm dealing on every races with, I would say, half of the team I'm directly coaching. I'm responsible for planning and for strategy and for everything. And the other part of the team, I'm not coaching them. But when I'm on racing, I help them the same way. We work on the logistics, on the strategy, on close contact with the coaches of the athletes in order to have them perform at their best. So I'm doing that on every races. And if you do that well, the athletes, they will trust you. And I believe that the athletes, they trust the coaches, even if they are not their effective coaches. If you are doing your job properly as a national coach, you will be able on spot to help them on a very good way. Some feedbacks are only possible if you have the direct coach of the athlete because you know them well. But for me, it's natural. Some athletes coming in, athletes going out, and as a performance director or as a national coach, to work with athletes, you are not the real responsible for the planning. When I started in Portugal, it is still a small federation, but it was a very small federation in 2000. So I was at the same time the performance director, but the direct coach of the athletes from the national team. So it was the only way. There was no resources to have different coaches, and the number of coaches for high performance was really low and reduced in Portugal. Now, in this different phase of my life, if I would again be performance director, I would not accept to coach athletes. It was possible by that time because of this very small national federation. Now, I believe on any developed federation, it's not possible to be coach and at the same time taking macro and very big decisions about planning at the same time. It's not possible anymore. Frank knows what I'm saying, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you, Sergio.